Thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day. Thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day.
Well, all right. Good morning. It's good to be back with you. Good to be able to function with this this setup the way it's supposed to, so I can play my little morning theme and just feel like all's right with the world. That's amazing. Plus, we're also now broadcasting, or I should say, simulcasting live to both Facebook and YouTube. We'll see how this goes. I'm, going to start broadcasting these hopefully on our Heaven's Invasion channel on YouTube. If you're interested in that, which if you're on Facebook, there's no reason why you would be, but in case you are, you can see those and all of the video teachings that we've posted over the past number of years are right there. You can search for Heaven's Invasion TV on YouTube, and that should pull up the channel. But anyway, it's good to be back with you today and have a few minutes to share again from the Word of God, just all the good stuff that He has in store for us as His kids and what He's done to really make our relationship with Him so free and so easy and just so awesome. So that's really why we're here. So good morning, Donna, Joanne, Javier. Hey, it's good to see you. Jane, good morning. Susan, thank you so much for jumping in here at the beginning. So we're in Mark chapter 3. We've been kind of walking through Mark, the Gospel of Mark, over these past couple of weeks, and we're going to pick it up in verse 7. And Jesus has had a rather blunt, in-your-face experience with the Pharisees in a synagogue here at the beginning of the chapter. And after that was over, in verse 7, it says that Jesus withdrew to the sea with his disciples, and a great multitude from Galilee followed, and also from Judea, and from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and beyond the Jordan, and the vicinity of Tyre and Sidon. A great multitude heard of all that he was doing and came to him. Word traveled fast. Oh my gosh. So, I mean, obviously we don't know what this number was in terms of a great multitude, but consider that on other occasions when he fed people, right, that, it talked about feeding 5,000, and that only, was an estimate based on the number of men that were there. Again, because culturally, that's what they did, unfortunately, back then. So we don't know how big it was, but this was a huge crowd. And so in verse 9, he told his disciples that a boat should stand ready for him because of the multitude, in order that they might not crowd him. For he had healed many, and the result that all those who had afflictions pressed toward him in order to touch him. I mean, just think about this for a minute. Here's Jesus, right? One man, with all this power that God had given to him. And he's standing there and he's healing person after person after person as people were coming to him. And then people were just coming and pushing and trying to get so they could just touch him. Can you imagine that scene? Can you imagine if that had been you standing there and you are just, thank God Jesus wasn't claustrophobic, right? I mean, he's like standing there in the midst of this huge crowd with people pressing on him, pressing in, just trying to touch him so that he could touch them. And even if he didn't touch them, they were touching him because they knew that just touching him was going to release power to heal him. I mean, it's almost mind-boggling to consider what that had to have been like for him to be so fully engaged in what he was called to do, in terms of bringing a demonstration of the kingdom of God, bringing the reality of the Father's presence, the nature of the Father, what he's really like, being demonstrated in the lives of these people as he healed one after another, after another, after another. I mean, it just, whoo. I mean, I've been in situations where I've been called upon to minister to whole rooms of people. It's exhausting. I mean, you're like you're going from one person after another, either prophesying over them or praying over them or whatever, releasing healing, freedom. It's exhausting. And so here's Jesus doing this, seemingly nonstop until, of course, they bring a boat. He's finally able to get into a boat and move far enough offshore that people realize, okay, I'm not swimming out there. Okay. And so it says in verse 11 as well, it says that whenever the unclean spirits beheld him, they would fall down before him and cry out saying, "You are the Son of God." I he's getting testimony from the kingdom of darkness as to his true identity. And of course, he's not having any of that, because that's not a good thing at that point. So he earnestly warned them not to reveal his identity. He doesn't want things to go so fast, so accelerate so quickly that he can't fulfill his earthly ministry, that was to take that 3.5 years before, the time was right for him to be crucified. So, I look at this and it reminds me in so many ways of just how our own lifestyles can become. Many of us are working very hard to, be successful, get ahead, or even just stay afloat. Let's be honest. And where our lives can be consumed with all the stuff around us, all the different needs and responsibilities that we have. And so our work life is many times very, very overwhelming. And in our modern society, we're at a disadvantage. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but years and years ago, before we have these modern conveniences, people worked hard, but they could only work during daylight hours for the most part. There were no lights, no electricity. There was nothing to occupy their time once the sun went down. They had maybe, a candle or an oil lamp that they could use for a while, but you had to conserve that. You just couldn't burn up all your candles in one night, right? So folks had a chance to really get some sleep, have a greater balance of rest time with their work time. Man, we don't have that. We just don't. I mean, most of us feel blessed if we get 6 hours of sleep. It's just like, oh my gosh. So our work life, not usually good. Yet what we see here with Jesus is we see a real demonstration of what work-life balance looks like. Because right after he has this exhausting time of ministry, we move into this next passage here, starting in verse 13, where it says that he went up to the mountain. And, Mark's account of this is in many ways the Reader's Digest version. If you remember what that magazine is all about, they'll take articles and books and condense them, so that you can kind of get the gist of it quickly. So Mark is kind of like that. He's very action oriented, and he doesn't have a lot of the backstories and a lot of the details, but Luke does. Luke really was a writer. And so I'm going to read to you from Luke's account, because there's something here that is very important for us to understand. And so Luke 6, starting in verse 12, it says, "And it was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray. And he spent the whole night in prayer to God. Now think about this. He just spent the whole day in ministry, first at the synagogue, then in the afternoon, being crushed by people, ministering, teaching, all of that. And when nighttime comes, you'd think, wow, thank God I can go to sleep. No, he goes up a mountain and begins to pray and spends the whole night in prayer. That is interesting. Why did he do that? Well, it goes on to say that when day came, he called his disciples to him. Now, Jesus had probably dozens of disciples, dozens of people who considered themselves to be his disciples because they followed him around. They made sure they were there to listen and see what he was doing. So Jesus calls all his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also named his apostles. And then it goes and lists the 12 apostles, the 12 disciples. So it's pretty clear that despite his exhaustion and fatigue, he knew he needed to be in the presence of his Father in order to continue his ministry and be successful in it, because it was during that night of prayer, very likely, it seems, based on the chronology here, that he received the revelation from his Father as to who the 12 were going to be, his closest 12 disciples. Not that he was rejecting the others, but you can't really minister deeply to large numbers of people. You've got to focus on a certain set few. And in his case, he had 12. And later we see that he actually also had 3, Peter, James, and John, who had an even closer relationship with him. So in that night of prayer, he receives strategic revelation concerning what he was to do going forward, picking these 12 guys. Mark in his account says that he appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to cast out the demons, right? So the Father was giving him this strategy during that night of prayer. And what I'm really fascinated by personally is just this idea that is what constituted work-life balance for Jesus. Again, my thought would be, man, after that day, I'm getting a massage and I'm knocked out for the night. And not that there's anything wrong with that. Please don't misunderstand me. Those kinds of times where we do, because there's another incident in the Gospels we'll get to where he says to his disciples, hey, it's time to come apart from everything and let's just rest, So that's entirely appropriate. But what we need to understand, and what I find fascinating here, is that for Jesus, his work-life balance was met by spending time with the Father. And man, that encourages me so much, because what it tells me is that if I don't have time to do something, that would refresh me, that would give me rest, that would enable me, to recuperate from a very hard season or day of work, right? I can receive that by getting into my Father's presence, by making time for that, however much time it looks like, right? I can make time for that. And clearly Jesus was okay. He was able to function fully on 0 sleep. It seems that he didn't get sleep probably for, those 36 hours, till that following day's evening when he finally was able to get to sleep. So be encouraged in that regard that, for us in this modern society, again, as I said, where we are so pulled and pushed and, we're trying to just juggle all these balls at once, so to speak, right? Even a few moments of intentional connection with the Father can provide us with the work-life balance that we need, right? Obviously, there are other things that we should consider doing if we're extending or overextending ourselves, in how we live. But when you have no other recourse, simply coming into his presence, putting on some worship music, and just saying, Lord, I just need you. I need to experience your presence right now. As it says in Psalms, how in your presence is fullness of joy, at your right hand are pleasures forevermore. That's what we can encounter whenever we need it. And so I encourage you to consider that to be your go-to in having a work-life balance, that is meaningful in your life. And then also think about other practical things that you might want to implement as well that will help you to not get burned out, because getting burned out, it is no fun. It really isn't. So hope that's encouraging for you. Good morning. Let's see who else we got here this morning that I haven't said hi to. Good morning, Jason. How you doing? Damien, how are you, buddy? Donka, good morning. Keith, how's it going? Hey, Isaiah, it's been a while. Thank you so much. That's a nice thing. If you're able to just kind of let me be your background noise while you're getting ready for work. That's awesome. Sarah, good morning. Good to see you. Linda, how are you? Great to see you guys. See, I got a couple of folks on YouTube. Forgive me, I don't have the chat up for YouTube. I got to figure out how to do that as well. I'm also simulcasting on YouTube now on the Heavens Invasion TV channel. So, if you're ever not able to get Facebook, you can try to pick it up through that channel as well. So again, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'll once again ask you to be a Share Bear buddy and let people know about this by sharing the video. And if you'd like to reach out, there's my email, or you can certainly send me a Facebook private message. And I look forward to hanging out with you again tomorrow, same time, 8:30 Eastern. And until then, you be blessed.